I'm Aaron, 34, and my own father just pinned me against the wall while my mother sliced my face open with her diamond ring. All because I refused to be their ATM. Before I tell you how I evicted them from a mansion they didn't even know I owned, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth before my brain even registered the pain. It wasn't a sharp sting. It was a dull, heavy throb that radiated from my cheekbone down to my jaw. I stumbled back, my heel catching on the edge of the beige area rug in my living room. I didn't fall, but the room spun. "Look at me when I'm talking to you, boy," my father, Frank, growled. His face was a shade of purple I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. He took a step forward, his heavy boots thudding against the hardwood floor. "You think you're some big shot now? You think because you drive that fancy car you can look down on your family?" I brought a hand to my face. My fingers came away wet and red. I looked at my mother, Deborah. She wasn't horrified. She wasn't rushing to get ice. She was standing by the fireplace, adjusting the strap of her designer handbag, a look of pure disgust plastered across her face. The diamond ring on her right hand, the one I had bought her for her 60th birthday 2 years ago, was smeared with my blood. "You're ungrateful, Aaron," she hissed. Her voice was cold, lacking any maternal warmth. "Your brother is drowning and you're buying toys. A Porsche Panamera? Really? While Kyle is driving that beat-up sedan." "Kyle is 29 years old," I managed to say, though my jaw clicked painfully when I moved it. I spit a glob of blood onto the floor. "He gambled away his last loan. I'm not giving him $50,000 to invest in a business that doesn't exist." That was the wrong thing to say. Frank lunged at me. He was 65, but he was a big man, built like a retired linebacker who never let himself go soft, just hard and mean. He grabbed the collar of my shirt, twisting the fabric until it cut off my air supply, and slammed me back against the built-in bookshelf. Books and framed photos rained down around us. The glass of a picture frame shattered near my feet. A photo of me and my daughter, Mia, at the beach. "It's not a request," Frank spat, his face inches from mine. I could smell the stale coffee and whiskey on his breath. "We are a family. The money you make, it belongs to the family. You don't get to hoard it while your brother suffers. You don't get to play high and mighty. Get off me," I wheezed, trying to pry his fingers loose. "Frank, let go." "It's Dad," he roared, shaking me so hard my head bounced off the wooden shelf. A sharp bolt of pain shot through my skull, and my vision blurred for a second. "You will write that check. You will apologize to your mother for bleeding on her rug. And you will give Kyle the keys to that car until he gets back on his feet. He needs to look successful to make deals, Aaron. You know how this works." I didn't answer. I was trying to focus on breathing. But then, a sound cut through the chaos that froze the blood in my veins. A scream, high-pitched, terrified, and piercing. "Daddy!" I twisted my head. Mia, my 8-year-old daughter, was standing in the doorway of her bedroom, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terror no child should ever know. She was wearing her pink pajamas, trembling from head to toe. "Mia, go back inside," I yelled, but the sound came out gargled. My mother turned to her. Instead of comforting her, she marched over, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. She loomed over my daughter. "Stop that noise, you little brat. Go to your room. Maybe if your father knew how to listen like a good son, you wouldn't have to see him get disciplined." Disciplined. As if I were 5 years old. As if I weren't a grown man who paid his own mortgage, taxes, and bills. Mia tried to run past her to get to me, but Frank still had me pinned. When he saw Mia running, he didn't let go. He shoved me harder against the shelf. "Stay back," Frank bellowed at my daughter. "Don't you touch her," I shouted, the adrenaline finally overriding the shock. I brought my knee up, driving it into Frank's thigh. It wasn't a knockout blow, but it was enough to make him grunt and loosen his grip. I shoved him away and scrambled toward Mia. I scooped her up in my arms, shielding her face into my chest, so she wouldn't see the blood dripping from my chin. It's okay, baby. Daddy's got you. Frank recovered quickly. He wiped his mouth, staring at me with a look of pure hatred. You raise a hand against your father? For this? He gestured around the room. For money? You'd hit your own father over a check. You broke into my house, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You assaulted me. Get out. Now. My mother laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Get out? Or what? You'll call the police on your own parents? You don't have the spine, Aaron. You never have. You were always the weak one. Kyle has fire. You're just cold. I said get out. I screamed, backing toward the front door, keeping Mia shielded. We're not going anywhere, Frank said, crossing his arms. He sat down on my leather sofa, the leather creaking under his weight. He put his boots up on the coffee table. We're staying right here until you transfer the funds. And since you want to be difficult, let's make it 60,000. Consider the extra 10 attacks for your disrespect. My phone was in my pocket. I could feel the weight of it. I had started the voice recording app the moment they started banging on my door 10 minutes ago. They didn't know. They thought I was just the passive tech nerd son who got lucky with some investments. Mom, Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady for Mia's sake. This is your last chance. Leave my property. Or what? Deborah taunted, picking up a porcelain vase from the mantel. A vase Mia had painted for me for Father's Day. She tossed it in the air and caught it, a silent threat. You're going to drag us out? I'd love to see you try. I'll scream elder abuse so loud the neighbors 3 streets over will hear it. Who do you think the cops will believe? A sobbing mother or a son who clearly has anger issues? She dropped the vase. It shattered. Mia flinched in my arms, sobbing quietly. Daddy, I'm scared. Why are Grandma and Grandpa so mean? That question broke something inside me. It snapped the last tether of obligation I felt toward the people who raised me. For years, I had tolerated their snide comments. I had tolerated the financial guilt trips. I had looked the other way when they favored Kyle, the golden child, who could do no wrong even as he burned their retirement savings up his nose or at the poker table. But they had brought violence into my sanctuary. They had terrified my daughter. I didn't fight them physically. I wasn't going to brawl with an old man in front of my child. I unlocked the front door, backing out into the cool evening air. Where are you going? Frank yelled, standing up. You walk away now, and you're dead to us. You hear me? Don't think about coming to Christmas. Don't think about asking for our blessing when you find some other woman to leave you like Chloe did. I didn't look back. I put Mia in the passenger seat of the Porsche Panamera, the car they hated so much because it wasn't Kyle's. I buckled her in, my hands shaking so badly I fumbled with the clasp. Daddy, you're bleeding, Mia whispered, reaching out to touch my cheek. I know, honey. I'm sorry, I said, starting the engine. The roar of the motor was usually satisfying, but tonight it just sounded like an escape vehicle. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Frank standing in my doorway, flipping me the middle finger. He looked triumphant. He thought he had won. He thought he had scared me off and that I would be back tomorrow with a check and an apology, just like I had done in my 20s. He had no idea. I drove down the street, the adrenaline slowly fading into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going to the police station just yet. I needed to get Mia safe, and I needed to make a phone call. You see, my parents lived in a beautiful 5-bedroom colonial mansion on the other side of town. It had a pool, a guest house, and a manicured lawn. They loved that house. It was their status symbol. It was proof to the world that Frank and Deborah were successful, that they were the elite. But they had forgotten one small detail about that house. They didn't own it. They hadn't owned it for 5 years. I did. And as the blood dried on my face, I realized it was time for an eviction. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room hummed with an irritating buzz. Dr. Evans, a man who had treated Mia for a broken arm last year, looked at the cut on my cheek with a frown. It's jagged, Aaron, he said, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. I'm going to have to use a few stitches. What did you say happened again? A ring, I muttered, staring at the sterile white tiles of the floor. I walked into a door frame. It had a metal latch. I lied. Not because I wanted to protect them, but because I didn't want the police involved yet in a way that would traumatize Mia further. She was sitting in the corner chair, holding an ice pop a nurse had given her, watching me with wide, worried eyes. I needed a strategic strike, not a messy domestic dispute that would drag on for months. Right? Dr. Evans said. He didn't believe me, but he didn't push. This is going to sting. As the needle pierced my skin, my mind drifted back to how we got here. To understand why my parents felt entitled to beat me for money, you have to understand the dynamic of my family. There was Kyle, and then there was everyone else. Kyle was 2 years younger than me. He was the athlete, the charmer, the one with the $1,000,000 smile. I was the nerd, the one who liked coding and architectural design. When I was 18, I got a partial scholarship to a decent university. I needed about $10,000 a year to cover the rest. My parents sat me down and told me money was tight, that they couldn't afford it. I understood. I worked 3 jobs, waiting tables, stocking shelves, fixing computers, to put myself through school. I graduated with honors, 0 help from them. 2 years later, when Kyle graduated high school with a C average, they bought him a brand new Mustang. They paid his full tuition to a private college, which he dropped out of after 3 semesters because it stifled his creativity. I never complained. I just worked. I got into software development right when the mobile app boom hit. I built a few small apps, sold one for a decent chunk of change, and then pivoted into real estate investment. But I did it quietly. I drove a Honda Civic for 10 years. I wore simple clothes. I didn't want them to know. I knew if they smelled money, the guilt trips would start. 5 years ago, the inevitable happened. Kyle's business ventures, which were mostly online gambling and pyramid schemes, had drained my parents dry. Frank had co-signed loans he shouldn't have. They were facing foreclosure. The bank was weeks away from taking their beloved mansion. I remember the day my mother called me, weeping. "We're going to be on the street, Aaron. After all we've done. The economy is just so unfair to your father." They didn't know I had liquidity. They thought I was just a mid-level IT manager making a standard salary. I couldn't let them be homeless. Despite everything, they were my parents. But I also knew I couldn't just give them the money. If I gave Frank the cash to pay off the arrears, he'd just leverage the house again for Kyle within a month. So I came up with a plan. I created a shell company, AM Holdings, Aaron and Mia. I hired a property management firm to act as the face of the company. I approached the bank and bought the debt, then foreclosed on the house myself, but offered the previous owners a deal. The deal was, they could stay in the house as tenants. The rent would be $1 a month, essentially free. But the lease was strict. They were tenants, not owners. They were responsible for utilities and upkeep. And there was a clause, a very specific clause I had my lawyer, Marcus, insert. The tenancy can be terminated immediately upon any evidence of criminal activity, harassment of the landlord or their agents, or destruction of property. My parents signed the papers with tears of relief, thinking AM Holdings was some charitable government program or a tax write-off scheme for a faceless corporation. They thanked God. They thanked the universe. They never thanked me. They didn't even know it was me. For 5 years, I paid the property taxes. I paid the insurance. I essentially subsidized their lifestyle so they could keep up appearances at the country club. And in return, they treated me like the black sheep. "All done," Dr. Evans said, snapping me back to the present. He taped a bandage over the stitches. "Keep it dry for 24 hours. And Aaron, if that door frame tries to hit you again, call the cops." "I will," I said. I walked over to Mia and picked her up. She was falling asleep, the sugar crash from the ice pop hitting her. "Are we going home?" she asked sleepily. "No, honey. We're going to a hotel tonight. A nice one. With a pool." "But my painting set is at home," she murmured. "We'll get you a new one," I promised. I carried her out to the parking lot. The night air was cool. My face throbbed with every heartbeat. I looked at my reflection in the car window. The bandage was large, white, and impossible to hide. This was it. The secret was over. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus. It was 9 p.m., but he picked up on the second ring. "Aaron, everything okay?" Marcus asked. He was one of the few people who knew the truth about my wealth and the house. He was my lawyer and my best friend since college. "No," I said, my voice raspy. "I need you to prepare the paperwork." "What paperwork?" "The acquisition for the warehouse." "No," I said, watching me asleep in the passenger seat. "The eviction notice for the property on Oakwood Drive." Frank and Deborah. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Marcus knew how much I had protected them. "Are you sure? Once you pull this trigger, you can't unpull it. It's nuclear war." "They assaulted me, Marcus, in front of Mia. Frank held me down and Mom cut my face with her ring." "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed. The professional tone vanished, replaced by the anger of a friend. "Are you okay? Is Mia okay?" "We're safe, but they are currently occupying my house, my actual house, not the one they rent. They're waiting for me to come back with a check." "I'm on it," Marcus said, the sound of a keyboard clacking in the background instantly audible. "I'll draft the notice to quit. Since it's a violence breach and they are technically on a month-to-month at-will tenancy with the LLC, we can move fast. But Aaron, you know they're going to fight this. They'll claim elder rights. They'll claim squatters' rights. They can claim whatever they want," I said, starting the car. "I have the deed. I have the lease. And I have a recording of the assault. Send me the recording. I'll get a restraining order filed first thing in the morning. That will force them out of your personal residence immediately. Then we hit them with the eviction for the mansion." "Do it," I said. I hung up and drove toward the downtown Hilton. As I drove, a notification popped up on my phone screen. It was a text from Kyle. "Bro, Mom says you're being a drama queen. Just bring the cash. I found a sweet deal on a Lembo. I need the deposit by noon TMRW. Don't be a DCK." Asterisk. I stared at the screen. A Lamborghini. He wanted me to fund a Lamborghini while I was driving to a hotel with stitches in my face. I didn't reply. I just deleted the thread. Kyle didn't know it yet, but he was about to lose a lot more than a car he never had. He was about to lose the roof over his head. The next morning, the sun was shining too brightly, mocking the dark mood I was in. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Frank's face contorted in rage and heard Mia's scream. I left Mia at the hotel with a trusted nanny service I had used before, a sweet older woman named Mrs. Higgins. I couldn't bring Mia back to the house, not yet. I needed to assess the situation. I drove back to my house. My actual house, a modern minimalist place I had designed myself. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Kyle's rusted Honda Civic parked right on my lawn. Not on the driveway, on the grass. Tire tracks tore through the landscaping I had paid a fortune for. I took a deep breath, checked the bandage on my face in the rearview mirror, and stepped out. I didn't go in. I just walked to the window to look inside. What I saw made my blood boil. They had made themselves at home. Frank was in my recliner, eating cereal out of the box. Deborah was on the phone, pacing around the kitchen. But it was Kyle who infuriated me the most. He was wearing my bathrobe. He was lying on my Italian leather sofa, his bare feet propped up on the coffee table, right next to a wine glass filled with dark liquid. I squinted. That was my vintage Cabernet, a bottle I had been saving for Mia's high school graduation or wedding. It was worth $3,000. He was drinking it like it was grape juice at a frat party. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The smell hit me instantly, stale cigarette smoke. I have a strict no-smoking rule. "Oh, look who decided to show up," Kyle said, not even looking away from the TV. He swirled the wine glass. "Nice bandage, Frankenstein. Makes you look tough." "Almost." Frank looked up, milk dripping from his chin. "You have the check? Get out," I said quietly. Deborah hung up the phone and marched over. Don't start this again, Aaron. I've had a terrible morning. I had to cancel my brunch with the girls because I didn't want to explain why I'm not at home. Do you know how embarrassing you are? You broke into my house, I said, stepping fully into the room. You assaulted me, and now you're smoking in my living room. We didn't break in, Frank scoffed. We're family. What's yours is ours. That's how it works. And we're not leaving until we get what we need. Kyle needs $50,000, Deborah said, as if ordering a sandwich. And I need $5,000 for the stress you've caused me. My blood pressure is through the roof. Kyle burped, loud and long. Actually, make it 60 for me, bro. The dealer fees are higher than I thought. I looked at them, really looked at them. For years, I had seen them as authority figures, people I needed to please. Now I just saw parasites. I'm not giving you a dime, I said. And if you aren't out of here in 5 minutes, the police will be. Frank stood up, the cereal box crumping in his hand. You call the cops, and I'll tell them you hit your mother. Who are they going to believe? Look at her face. I looked at Deborah. She had rubbed her makeup to look disheveled, but there wasn't a mark on her. I have cameras, I said simply. The room went silent. Kyle sat up, the wine sloshing in the glass. What? I have internal security cameras. I pointed to a tiny black on the motion sensor in the corner of the ceiling. Audio and video. Cloud storage. It recorded everything last night. The slap, the threat, the assault on me. Frank's face went pale. Deborah's hand flew to her mouth. You spied on us? Deborah gasped, playing the victim instantly. I secured my home, I corrected. And right now that footage is with my lawyer. He's filing for an emergency restraining order. So you have 2 choices. Leave now voluntarily, or wait 10 minutes for the sheriff to drag you out in handcuffs. Frank stared at me, his chest heaving. He was weighing his options. He realized he had lost the physical advantage. You would do that to your own blood? Frank whispered. Over money? No, I said, touching the bandage on my cheek. Over respect. And for Mia's safety. You terrified her. She's a soft kid, Frank grunted. Needs to toughen up. She's 8. I yelled, my voice cracking. Get out. Kyle stood up, tossing the expensive wine glass onto the floor. It shattered, red liquid splashing onto the white rug. Fine. Keep your stupid house. You're a loser anyway, Aaron. You'll always be a loser. Enjoy dying alone. He stormed out, still wearing my bathrobe. Frank and Deborah followed, grabbing their things. Deborah stopped at the door, turning to give me one last look. You're cutting yourself off from the only people who love you, she said venomously. Don't come crying to us when you fail. I won't, I said. As they got into their car and peeled out of the driveway, I felt my knees give way. I sank onto the floor, right next to the puddle of wine. I was shaking. It wasn't fear, it was the crash after the adrenaline. My phone rang. It was Marcus. Restraining order granted, Marcus said. The judge saw the video. He was not happy. Frank and Deborah are barred from coming within 500 feet of you or Mia. If they violate it, straight to jail. They just left, I said, staring at the ruined rug. They made a mess. Okay, phase 1 is done. Now phase 2. The mansion. How do we do this? I asked. I've drafted the eviction notice, but we need to serve it legally. And since you want the reveal to hit hard, I have an idea. Mr. Henderson, your property manager, called me. Apparently, Frank called him this morning demanding repairs to the pool heater. Of course he did. I laughed bitterly. Even while squatting in my house, they were demanding service at the other one. Henderson told them the owner is coming to do a site inspection tomorrow at 2 p.m. to approve the repairs. He told them the owner is very particular and might cancel the lease if the house isn't perfect. Perfect, I said. They'll be on their best behavior. Exactly. They'll be expecting some old rich guy. Instead, they get you. And the police? I'll have Officer Miller there as a civil standby. just in case Frank gets violent again. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked at the spot where Kyle had parked on the lawn. The grass was torn up, mud exposed. "One more thing, Marcus," I said. "Look into Kyle's finances. If he needs 60 grand that badly and quickly, it's not for a car. He was too desperate. I'm already running a background check. I'll have the details by tomorrow." "Aaron, are you ready for this? You're about to blow up your entire family structure." "My family structure blew up the moment my dad put his hands on me," I said. "Now, I'm just clearing away the rubble." I spent the rest of the day cleaning. I scrubbed the wine stain. I threw away the bathrobe Kyle had worn. I swept up the broken glass. I was erasing them from my home. Tomorrow I would erase them from my payroll. I thought about custody. Chloe, my ex-wife, was out of the picture, living in Europe with a new family. She had given up rights years ago because she couldn't handle Frank and Deborah. She had warned me. "They will eat you alive, Aaron," she had said during the divorce. "And if you don't stop them, they'll eat Mia too." I should have listened sooner, but I was listening now. I went to bed early, but sleep didn't come. I kept thinking about the inheritance. My grandfather had left me a gold watch, a vintage Omega. It was the only thing I had from him. I had left it in the safe at the mansion because I thought it was safer there than at my place while I was traveling last month. A sinking feeling hit my stomach. Kyle was desperate for money. I prayed the watch was still there, but deep down I knew better. The next morning the air felt electric. Today was the day. I dropped Mia off at school. She was clinging to me a little tighter than usual. "Daddy, is Grandpa going to come back?" she asked, her small hand gripping my finger. "No, sweetie. The police promised to keep him away. You're safe," I assured her. I watched her walk into the building, her pink backpack bouncing. As I turned to leave, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Across the street, leaning against a black SUV, was a man. He wasn't a parent. He was wearing a leather jacket that looked too expensive for a casual Tuesday drop-off, and he had a scar running through his eyebrow. He was watching the school. I recognized him, or rather, I recognized his type. In my line of work, real estate investment, you cross paths with all kinds of people. This guy was a collector, a shark. And he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the kids. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled out my phone and took a discreet photo of him. Then I texted it to Marcus. "Run this face. I think Kyle's debt is way worse than we thought." I got back in the Porsche and drove to Marcus's office. "You look like hell," Marcus said as I walked in. He handed me a coffee. "Thanks. Tell me you have the paperwork." Marcus slid a thick manila envelope across his mahogany desk. "Notice to quit, lease termination agreement, and a copy of the deed proving ownership of AM Holdings. It's all here, ironclad." "And the background check on Kyle?" I asked, sitting down. Marcus sighed and leaned back in his chair. "It's ugly, Aaron. He owes money to a loan shark named Vinny the Vice Moretti. About 80,000. And that's just the principal. The interest is climbing daily." "That explains the guy at the school," I said, showing Marcus the photo. Marcus turned pale. "If that's one of Moretti's guys, Aaron, Kyle isn't just a screw-up. He's dangerous. He's bringing organized crime to your daughter's doorstep. That's why we end this today," I said, my voice hardening. "I need to cut off his supply. If he thinks he can get money from me or the parents, he'll keep stalling the sharks. He needs to hit rock bottom." "Just be careful," Marcus warned. "When you take away the house, Frank is going to lose his mind. That house is his identity." "It's not his house," I corrected. "It never was." I left the office and met up with Mr. Henderson, my property manager. He was a nervous, balding man who hated conflict, which was why I paid him double to deal with my parents. "They're cleaning like crazy," Henderson reported as we sat in his car. "Your mother hired a cleaning crew this morning. She wants to impress the owner. She thinks if she charms him, he might fix up the pool cabana too." "She's in for a surprise," I said. "Are you sure you want to do this, Aaron? I mean, It's harsh. Henderson, do you know what they did to me? I pointed to the bandage. He nodded, swallowing hard. Right? Okay, I'll drive. You follow in. Wait, what car are you taking? I borrowed a friend's car, I said. If I show up in the Porsche, they'll just think I'm there to apologize. I need to show up as the landlord. I had called in a favor from a business partner who collected luxury cars. I picked up the keys to a Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was excessive. It was theatrical. But it was necessary. I needed to project absolute power. I needed them to see the gap between us, not just the financial gap, but the gap in control. As I drove the massive, silent beast of a car toward Oakwood Drive, I thought about the college fund I had started for Mia. I had been putting money aside since she was born. My parents had once asked me to borrow from it to pay for Kyle's rehab, the first time. I had refused, and they didn't speak to me for a month. I gripped the steering wheel. Every time I said no, they punished me. Today I was saying no permanently. I pulled over a block away from the mansion. I checked the time. 1:55 p.m. Officer Miller's cruiser pulled up behind me. He flashed his lights once. Ready, Mr. Miller? I asked, rolling down the window. Ready, Aaron. Just stay calm. Let me handle the physical stuff if it goes south. I intend to, I said. I put the car in gear. The mansion loomed ahead, a sprawling white colonial with pillars. It looked majestic. It looked like the American dream. Inside, the nightmare was waiting. I pulled the Rolls-Royce into the circular driveway. The gravel crunched satisfyingly under the heavy tires. I could see the curtains twitching in the front window. They were watching. I parked right in the center, blocking the view of the front door. Henderson parked his modest sedan behind me. Officer Miller parked on the street, staying out of sight for now. I took a deep breath. Showtime. I stepped out of the car. I was wearing my best suit, a custom-tailored navy Italian wool suit that I usually only wore to board meetings. I put on my sunglasses, hiding my eyes but leaving the bandage on my cheek visible. The front door swung open before I even reached the steps. Frank stood there wearing a blazer and slacks, his hair slicked back. He looked the part of the lord of the manor. Deborah was beside him in a floral dress, wearing pearls. Kyle was lurking behind them, looking twitchy and hungover, but wearing a collared shirt. They were beaming, a fake, plastic smile plastered on their faces. They were looking at the Rolls-Royce, not at me. Good afternoon, Frank boomed, stepping forward with his hand extended. Welcome to our humble. He stopped. I took off my sunglasses. The silence that descended on the driveway was absolute. A bird chirped somewhere, sounding deafeningly loud. Frank's hand froze in midair. Deborah's smile faltered, twitching at the corners. Kyle squinted, confusing clouding his drug-hazed eyes. Aaron, Frank whispered. The confusion was genuine. What are you doing here? Where is the owner? I'm here for the inspection, I said calmly, ignoring his hand. I walked past him, up the steps and into the foyer. You, Deborah sputtered, chasing after me. You can't be here. We have a meeting with the owner of the property. Mr. Henderson said. Mr. Henderson works for me, I said, stopping in the middle of the grand hallway. The chandelier I had paid for sparkled above us. And so does the landscaping crew, and the pool guys, and the insurance company. I turned to face them. I am the owner, Dad. I am AM Holdings. Frank laughed. It was a nervous, incredulous sound. Stop playing games, Aaron. You think renting a fancy car makes you a big shot? You're an IT manager. You make 80 grand a year. Get out before the real landlord comes and calls the cops. Show them, Henderson, I said. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, looking terrified but holding the file. He handed a copy of the deed to Frank. Frank snatched the paper. His eyes scanned the document. I watched his face change. First, confusion, then shock, then a deep, darkening shade of red. Phoenix LLC. Manager, Aaron Miller. Frank read. His hands started to shake. Date of purchase, 5 years ago. He looked up at me, betrayal written all over his face. You? You bought the debt? You've been our landlord for 5 years. Yes, I said. When the bank was going to kick you to the curb, I stepped in. I bought the house so you wouldn't be homeless. I let you live here for $1 a month. $1. And I paid for everything. Deborah grabbed the paper from Frank. No, that's impossible. You don't have this kind of money. We would know. You didn't know because you never asked, I said, my voice rising slightly. You never asked about my life, my business, my success. You only asked for checks. You only cared about how much you could squeeze out of me. So you lied to us. Deborah screamed, twisting the narrative instantly. You let us live here thinking we were charity cases while you lorded it over us? You humiliated us. I protected your dignity, I shouted back. I let you pretend you still owned this place so you could keep your friends. And how did you repay me? How? I pointed to the bandage on my face. You beat me, in my own home, for money. Kyle stepped forward, his eyes wild. Wait, so you have money? Like, real money? If you own this place, it's worth like $2 million. Bro, this is great. You can just refinance it and give me the 60 grand. Problem solved. I stared at him. The sheer delusion was breathtaking. There is no us, Kyle, I said coldly. And there is no money for you. I pulled the eviction notice from my inside pocket. Frank Miller, Deborah Miller, Kyle Miller. You are hereby served with a notice to quit immediately due to violation of lease terms regarding violence against the landlord and criminal activity on the premises. I dropped the papers on the hallway table. You have 24 hours to vacate. After that, the locks change. You can't do this. Frank roared. He balled his fists and took a step toward me. The old instinct, the fear of my father, flared up for a second, but I crushed it. Frank, don't, I warned. I'm your father. I gave you life. This house is mine. I earned it. He lunged. Officer, I yelled. Officer Miller stepped through the open front door. Frank Miller, step back. Keep your hands where I can see them. Frank froze. Seeing a uniformed police officer in his hallway broke his momentum. He looked from me to the cop, realizing he was trapped. You called the cops on me? Frank rasped. He looked small suddenly. Old. You violated the restraining order by threatening me just now, Officer Miller said sternly. And since Mr. Miller here is the legal owner of the property, he has the right to ask you to leave. Deborah burst into tears. Real ugly tears this time. She collapsed onto the staircase. My home. My beautiful home. Aaron, please. Where will we go? We have nowhere. You have Kyle, I said, looking at my brother. He's the golden child, right? Let him take care of you. Kyle looked around, panic setting in. I can't. I don't have a place. Aaron, come on, man. Don't be like this. It's just a misunderstanding. We're family. Family doesn't extort family, I said. And family doesn't sell their grandfather's watch. I saw the flicker of recognition in Kyle's eyes. Where is it? I asked, walking up to him. The Omega. I left it in the safe in the study. I checked the logs. The safe was opened 3 days ago. By you. Kyle licked his lips. I borrowed it. To get it cleaned. You pawned it, I said, disgust filling my chest. To pay your bookie. The guy standing outside Mia's school. He saw Mia? Kyle's face went white. Even he realized the line he had crossed. Officer Miller, I said, turning to the cop. I'd like to press charges for theft. And I want them removed from the premises. Now. No, Deborah wailed, grabbing my leg. Aaron, baby, please. Don't arrest your brother. He's sick. He needs help. He needs consequences. I said, pulling my leg away. And so do you. Officer Miller grabbed Kyle's arm. Kyle Miller, you're under arrest for the theft of the watch and violation of a protective order. Let's go. As they dragged Kyle out, screaming obscenities at me. Frank slumped against the wall. He looked at me, his eyes hollow. "You planned this," he whispered. "You planned to destroy us." "I planned to save you," I said, my voice trembling with the aftershocks of the confrontation. "I saved you for 5 years. But you forced my hand. You destroyed yourselves." I turned and walked out the door, past the sobbing form of my mother and the defeated figure of my father. I walked down the steps to the Rolls-Royce. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn I used to mow as a kid. It was over. The lie was over. The next few hours were a blur of logistics and emotional exhaustion. I sat in the study of the mansion, my mansion, watching the movers I had hired carry boxes out. Frank and Deborah were packing under the supervision of 2 police officers. They were allowed to take their clothes, personal items, and furniture. Everything else, the fixtures, the appliances, stayed. I didn't help them carry a single box. Deborah came into the study one last time. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked 10 years older than she had this morning. "Aaron," she said, her voice trembling, "we have a room at the Motel 6. It's filthy. There are bugs." I didn't look up from the paperwork I was signing. "I lived in a car for 3 months when I was starting my company, Mom. You'll survive." "How can you be so cruel?" she asked. "We're your parents." "Cruelty," I said, looking her in the eye, "is laughing while your husband beats your son. Cruelty is threatening your granddaughter. This isn't cruelty. This is justice." She flinched as if I had slapped her. "I didn't laugh," she lied. "I was in shock. I have the recording, Mom. I heard you." She stood there for a long moment, waiting for me to crack. Waiting for the dutiful son to reemerge and write a check. But that son was gone. He died when she sliced his face. "Goodbye, Deborah," I said. She turned and left, sobbing loudly for the benefit of the movers. Frank didn't say a word. He just glared at me as he carried his golf clubs to his car. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. He was losing his home, but he made sure to save his golf clubs first. Once they were gone, the house fell silent, felt massive, and empty. I walked upstairs to Kyle's room. The police had already tossed it. It was a disaster zone. Pizza boxes, empty bottles, drug paraphernalia hidden in a hollowed-out dictionary. On the dresser, I found a pawn ticket. It was for the Omega watch, $500. He had sold a $10,000 heirloom for $500. I pocketed the ticket. I would get it back tomorrow. My phone rang. It was the lawyer, Marcus. "Updates," Marcus said briskly. "Kyle is being held without bail. The connection to the loan shark spooked the judge. Plus, he failed a drug test. He's looking at real-time, Aaron. Theft over $5,000. Violation of RO. He's done." "Good," I said, feeling a wave of relief. At least he couldn't hurt Mia. "And Frank. Frank is calling everyone in town. He's telling people you stole the house from him. He's trying to sue you for fraud." "Let him try," I said. "The deed is solid." "I know, but be prepared for the social fallout. He's going to drag your name through the mud." "My name?" I laughed. "He's the one who's going to have to explain why he's living in a motel. Reputation is all he has, Marcus. And I just took it away." I hung up and walked out onto the balcony. I looked down at the pool. It was green with algae. Frank hadn't even bothered to skim it, despite living here for free. I realized then that I wasn't just angry about the money or the abuse. I was angry about the waste. They had been given a golden ticket, a free life in a luxury home, and they had squandered it because of their ego. They couldn't be grateful because that would mean admitting they needed help. I drove back to the hotel to pick up Mia. When I walked into the room, she ran to me. "Daddy, you're back." "I'm back, Peanut," I said, hugging her tight. "Did you see Grandpa?" "Yes," I said softly. "Grandpa and Grandma are going away for a long time. They won't bother us anymore." "Did you fix it?" she asked, looking at my bandage. "Yeah," I said, kissing her forehead. "I fixed everything. That night, I ordered room service, burgers and fries. We sat on the bed and watched cartoons. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of my phone in my pocket. I didn't dread the incoming call asking for money. The cord was cut. But the next morning, the reality of the emotional damage hit me. I received a voicemail from my Aunt Sarah, Deborah's sister. "Aaron." Her voice cracked on the recording. "Your mother just called me. She said you threw them on the street. She said you hit Frank. Aaron, tell me it's not true. I know they can be difficult, but family is family." I didn't call her back. Instead, I sent her the video clip. Just the 30 seconds of the assault. 5 minutes later, she texted back, "Oh my God, I am so sorry. I didn't know. If you need anything, I'm here. I had won the war, but the battlefield was littered with broken relationships." I went to the pawn shop the next day. The guy behind the counter looked at the ticket and then at my face. "Rough night?" he asked. "Rough life," I said. "I'm here for the Omega." He brought it out. It was scratched, but it was there. I put it on my wrist. The weight of it felt grounding. My grandfather had been a good man, hardworking, honest. He would have been ashamed of Frank. As I walked out of the shop, I saw a "for sale" sign in a store window. It gave me an idea. I wasn't going to live in that mansion. Too many bad memories. And I wasn't going to keep it as a rental. I called Henderson. "List the house," I said. "Sell it. Put the money into a trust for Mia's college fund." "All of it?" Henderson asked. "That's a lot of money." "Every cent," I said. That house was a symbol of their greed. Now, it's going to be the foundation of her future. I got into my Porsche. The engine purred. I looked in the mirror. The bandage was still there, but the bleeding had stopped. The scar would heal. And for the first time in my life, I was truly free. It's been 6 months since the day I watched the police escort my brother out of the mansion in handcuffs. 6 months since I looked my parents in the eye and severed the lifeline they had been abusing for decades. People often ask me if I regret it. They ask if I miss them. They ask if the silence in my house ever feels too heavy. And I look at them baffled. Because for the first time in 34 years, the silence isn't heavy. It's peaceful. My life with Mia has transformed in ways I couldn't have predicted. We didn't move far, but emotionally, we are in a different universe. We stayed in my modern minimalist home, the one my parents hated because it wasn't grand enough. But now, without their toxic shadow looming over us, the house feels like a sanctuary. The nightmares stopped for Mia about 2 months ago. In the beginning, she would wake up screaming, asking if Grandpa was coming to hurt me. We spent a lot of time in therapy. Dr. Evans, the therapist, suggested art as an outlet. Now our living room, the same room where my blood once stained the rug, is filled with easels and canvases. Mia paints everything. She paints the garden, the cat we adopted, and sometimes she paints storms clearing up to reveal bright yellow suns. It's a metaphor that isn't lost on me. But while we were rising, the Golden family was plummeting. News travels fast in our town, especially when it involves a police raid at a prominent address on Oakwood Drive. The story of the eviction got out. My Aunt Sarah, who had been horrified by the video footage, didn't exactly keep quiet. She told her bridge club, who told their husbands, who told the country club board. Frank and Deborah didn't just lose their home, they lost their audience. I saw them once about 3 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday, a mundane afternoon. I was stopping by the local pharmacy to pick up allergy medicine for Mia. I was walking down the aisle when I heard a familiar, sharp voice complaining about the price of vitamins. "It's highway robbery, Frank. We can't afford the brand name." I froze. Peeking through the gap between the shelves, I saw them. They looked diminished. Frank, who used to strut like he owned the pavement, was stooped over. He was wearing a jacket I recognized from 10 years ago, the fabric worn at the elbows. Deborah's hair, usually dyed a perfect, expensive blonde, was showing inches of gray roots. She wasn't wearing her pearls. They were arguing over a difference of $3. I watched them for a moment, expecting to feel a surge of anger or maybe a pang of guilt. But I felt nothing. It was like looking at strangers. They were just two bitter old people facing the reality of their own choices. I could have walked over. I could have paid for their vitamins. I had the black Amex in my wallet. It would have been nothing to me. But I remembered the look on Frank's face when he pinned me to the wall. I remembered Deborah's laugh. I turned my card around and walked to the other register. I didn't owe them my money, and I certainly didn't owe them my pity. The situation with Kyle was even bleaker, though entirely predictable. The charges stuck. Theft over $5,000, possession of narcotics, and violation of a protective order. Because of his prior record, which my father had always paid to seal or bury, the judge wasn't lenient. The golden child was sentenced to 18 months in a state facility, followed by mandatory rehab. I didn't go to the sentencing. Marcus went on my behalf. He told me that when the gavel banged, Kyle looked back at the audience, scanning the room for me. He expected me to swoop in at the last second, write a check and make it all go away. When he realized I wasn't there, he slumped in his chair and started to cry. Not tears of remorse, Marcus noted, but tears of a spoiled child who had finally been told no. However, just as the dust was settling, a ghost from my past decided to make an appearance. It was a Saturday morning. I was in the driveway washing the Porsche Panamera with Mia. We were covering each other in soap suds, laughing, the radio blasting classic rock. A silver Mercedes pulled up to the curb. My stomach tightened. I knew that car. It was Chloe, my ex-wife. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. She had left when Mia was 5, citing that she couldn't handle the pressure of my family. She had moved to the coast, remarried, and started a new life, leaving me to navigate single fatherhood and my parents' insanity alone. She stepped out of the car, looking polished and beautiful. She took off her sunglasses and looked at the house, then at the Porsche and finally at me. "Aaron," she said, flashing a smile that used to work on me. "You look good, strong." "Chloe," I said, putting down the sponge. I gestured for Mia to go inside. "Go get a juice box, honey." Mia ran inside, barely glancing at her mother. That stung, but it was reality. "What are you doing here?" I asked, drying my hands on a towel. "I heard the news," she said, walking up the driveway but stopping a few feet away. "About Frank and Deborah. About the mansion. Rumor has it you sold it for over $2 million. "The trust sold it," I corrected. "It's for Mia." Right?" She nodded, stepping closer. I was thinking about us. I realized I made a mistake leaving. I was weak, Aaron. I let your parents drive me away. But seeing you now, seeing how you stood up to them, that's the man I always wanted you to be. She reached out, her hand brushing my arm. "I filed for divorce from Gary last month. I'm staying at the Marriott. Maybe we could grab dinner? Talk about being a family again." I looked at her hand on my arm. 3 years ago, I would have begged for this. I would have given anything to have her back. But now, all I saw was another person who only wanted me when I was winning. She didn't want Aaron, the struggling peacemaker. She wanted Aaron, the victor, the guy with the Porsche and the $2 million asset. I stepped back, her hand falling to her side. "You didn't leave because of my parents, Chloe," I said, my voice steady. "You left because it was hard. You left because you didn't want to do the work. You abandoned Mia." "I needed to find myself," she protested. "Well, I hope you found yourself," I said. "But you're not finding a way back in here. We're happy. We're stable. And I'm not letting anyone disrupt that. Not my parents and not you." Her face hardened. The mask slipped. "You're arrogant, Aaron. You think just because you have money now you don't need anyone?" "I have everyone I need," I said, glancing at the window where Mia was pressing her nose against the glass, watching us. "I have my daughter, and I have my self-respect. Please leave my property." She stared at me for a long moment, realizing the door was truly closed. She spun on her heel, got back in her Mercedes, and drove off. I watched her go, feeling a strange sense of lightness. That was the final test. I had purged the toxicity from above, my parents, from below, my brother, and from the past, my ex. I walked back inside. Mia was waiting in the hallway. Is she gone? Mia asked quietly. Yes, baby. She's gone. Good, Mia said, hugging my waist. We don't need her. We're a team. Yeah, I smiled, stroking her hair. We're a team. That evening, I received a letter from the Department of Corrections. It was from Kyle. I debated burning it, but curiosity won. I opened it. The handwriting was scribbled and frantic. Aaron, this place is hell. You have to get me out. I know you sold the house. You have the cash. Just pay the lawyer. I promise I'll pay you back. I have a new business idea, crypto mining. It's guaranteed. Don't be a jerk. Mom is crying every day because of you. Fix this. No apology. No, how are you? No, I'm sorry I stole Grandpa's watch. Just demands. Just the same old entitlement. I walked to the kitchen counter, picked up a lighter, and set the corner of the letter on fire. I dropped it into the sink and watched it turn to ash. Fix this, I whispered to the empty room. I already did. The next morning, I met with Marcus to finalize the sale of the mansion. The buyers were a nice young couple from the city, tech entrepreneurs who had no idea about the dark history of the house. To them, it was just a beautiful colonial with great bones. Sign here, Marcus said, pointing to the line. I signed my name, Aaron Miller. Done, Marcus said, closing the folder. The funds will be wired to Mia's trust by close of business. After capital gains taxes and paying off the small mortgage balance you carried, she's set for life. College, grad school, maybe even a down payment on her own house one day. Thank you, Marcus, I said, shaking his hand. For everything. You did the hard part, Marcus said. I just pushed the paper. How does it feel to be officially landless? I'm not landless, I said. I own my home, the one I actually live in, the one where I'm safe. I walked out of his office and into the bright sunlight. The air smelled fresher. The noise of the city seemed like music. I got into my car and checked the time. School pickup was in 20 minutes. I had time to stop and get Mia a surprise. She had been asking for a new set of oil paints. As I drove, I thought about the concept of the golden child. My parents had spent their lives polishing Kyle, trying to make him shine, pouring all their resources into him. They thought he was their legacy. But gold is soft. It bends. It scratches. It has no structural integrity. I wasn't gold. I was steel. I had been forged in the fire of their neglect, hammered by their criticism, and quenched in the cold reality of the world. And steel holds up the building. I pulled into the art supply store parking lot. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. It's your mother. Please, Aaron. We're hungry. I looked at the message. I felt a twinge in my chest, that biological impulse to help. But then I remembered the 60-year-old woman who stood by and watched her husband throttle her son. I remembered the woman who called my daughter a brat. I didn't block the number. That would be running away. I replied, I suggest you contact local social services. They have programs for seniors in need. Do not contact me again. I put the phone away and walked into the store. I bought the biggest, most colorful set of paints they had. The seasons changed. The leaves turned orange, then fell, and the first snow of winter dusted the driveway. Life settled into a rhythm that was boring in the most beautiful way possible. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I helped Mia with her math homework. On weekends, we hiked or visited museums. There were no screaming matches, no frantic calls about loan sharks, no police cruisers in the driveway. One evening, I was sitting in my study, organizing some files. I opened the small safe I kept under my desk. Inside sat the Omega watch. I took it out, feeling the cold metal against my palm. I ran my thumb over the crystal face. I had paid $550 to get it out of the pawn shop, plus another $200 to have a jeweler buff out the scratches Kyle had put on it. It looked new again, but I knew the scratches had been there. I put it on my wrist and looked at the time. 7 p.m. Time to read to Mia. I walked into her room. She was sitting on her bed, sketching in a notebook. "Hey," I said, sitting on the edge of the mattress. "What are you drawing?" She turned the book around. It was a drawing of two people holding hands. One was tall, one was small. They were standing in front of a house that looked like ours. "It's us," she said. "It's perfect." I smiled. "Daddy?" she asked, putting the pencil down. "Do you miss them? Grandpa and Grandma?" I thought about the answer carefully. I didn't want to lie to her, but I didn't want to burden her either. "I miss who I wanted them to be," I said honestly. "I miss the idea of having a grandpa and grandma who brought cookies and told stories. But I don't miss the yelling. I don't miss the hurting." "Me neither," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I like it better just us." "Me too, kiddo." We read a chapter of Harry Potter, and she drifted off to sleep. I tucked her in, making sure the nightlight was on. I walked downstairs and poured myself a glass of wine. Not the expensive stuff Kyle had wasted, just a decent bottle I enjoyed. I sat by the window and watched the snow fall. I thought about the word legacy. Frank always talked about legacy. He thought legacy was the name on the country club locker or the address on the driver's license. He thought legacy was maintaining the illusion of perfection. He was wrong. Legacy isn't what you own. It's who you raise. It's the values you instill. It's the safety you provide. My legacy wasn't the mansion. My legacy was sleeping upstairs, safe and sound, dreaming of colors and light. My legacy was the fact that the cycle of abuse stopped with me. It ended at my doorstep. I had absorbed the blows so she wouldn't have to. I had taken the scars so she could have a blank canvas. My phone buzzed again. It was an email from the prison system, an automated notification about Kyle's visitation schedule approval. I deleted it without opening it. I had already made it clear. I was not on the visitor list. I realized then that I had finally achieved what I had been chasing my whole life. Not their approval. Not their love. I had achieved indifference. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate takes energy. Hate is a connection. I just didn't care. They were characters in a book I had finished reading. I had closed the cover and put it back on the shelf. The next morning, the sun was blindingly bright on the snow. I bundled Mia up in her coat and boots. We were going to get a Christmas tree. "Can we get a huge one?" she asked, bouncing on her heels. "We can get the biggest one that fits in the living room," I promised. We piled into the Porsche. I know it's just a car, but as I gripped the steering wheel, I appreciated what it represented. It was the fruit of my labor. It was something I earned, not something I was given, and definitely not something I owed anyone. As we drove down the winding road, passing the turnoff that led to Oakwood Drive, I didn't even look in the rearview mirror. "Daddy, look!" Mia pointed to a hawk soaring above the trees. "It's free." "Yeah, baby," I said, pressing the accelerator, feeling the car surge forward, smooth and powerful. "It really is." We drove on, leaving the shadows behind us, heading toward a future that belonged entirely to us. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to live, and it wasn't easy to tell. But I shared it because I know I'm not alone. There is a dangerous myth in our culture that family is everything, and that blood is thicker than water. We are taught that we must forgive family members no matter how much they hurt us, how much they steal from us, or how much they abuse us. That is a lie. Here is the lesson I learned the hard way. Toxic is toxic, whether it comes from a stranger or someone who shares your DNA. Financial independence is your shield. My parents could control me when I was young because I needed them. Once I had my own resources, the dynamic changed. They hated my money because they couldn't control it. Build your own safety net. It's the only way to say no without fear. Protect the innocent. As a parent, your primary duty is to your child, not your parents. When Frank threatened Mia, he lost his title of grandfather. You do not owe your parents access to your children if they cannot respect your boundaries. The power of the bad guy. Sometimes, to save yourself, you have to be willing to be the villain in their story. My parents tell everyone I'm an ungrateful monster. I let them. I would rather be a monster who is safe and happy than a good son who is broken and bleeding. If you are holding on to a relationship that hurts you just because of obligation or guilt, take this as your sign to let go. You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I want to hear from you. What is the hardest boundary you've ever had to set with a family member? Did you feel guilty, or did you feel free? Drop a good in the comments if you agree that peace is worth more than a toxic inheritance. Or share your story. Let's support each other in breaking these cycles. Thank you for watching. Stay strong and protect your peace.